Okay, everyone. Hello, and welcome to our session, where we're going to be deep diving into human-centric AI and the workplace. So I'm David Rowlands. I'm the Global Head of AI at KPMG, and I'm going to be your moderator for the next hour in this session, which we're also live streaming so we can reach a wider virtual audience. So hello, Mom. So let's get going. We've got a lot to unpack today. So the potential benefits of AI have been widely discussed, whether that's automation, speed to insight, accelerated transformation programs, or a better customer experience. And the risks of AI have also been well documented. So whether that's false information, poor quality of data, displacement of jobs, or unintended consequences if it's not ethically developed and regulated in that trusted way. But what will AI in the workplace really look like? How can organizations deploy AI in a trusted way? What does that roadmap look like? Can AI really enable businesses to become more empathetic and therefore customer-centric? And how do organizations take people on that journey, that AI journey with them? So I can't think of three better people to be discussing those questions with than our speakers today. So we have Leigh-Ann Russell, who is the Executive Vice President for Innovation and Engineering at BP. We have John Hinshaw, who's the Group Chief Operating Officer for HSBC, and Brad Smith, Vice Chair and President of Microsoft. So a very warm welcome to each of you, and thank you for joining our panel today. Okay, so Brad, it'd be good to kick off with some reflections from you. So in KPMG's latest CEO Outlook study, 70% of global CEOs are making Gen AI a top investment priority to give them that competitive edge. So give us your thoughts on the current state of AI in the workplace and how you think it's going to reshape the future of work.
I would say a couple of things. I mean, first, we're all on a journey. We're all on the journey together. And in some ways, if you just go back to Davos a year ago, if you were here, it was just really on about day 45 after the release of ChatGPT. So, people were talking about it. Some people were using it, but most people didn't have experience with AI, Gen AI, beyond that one application. So a year later, what has happened? I would say a lot of 2023 around the world was really companies, but also governments and nonprofits, first standing up proofs of concept. Yeah. They would pick a specific business process or government process. They picked it for good reason. They thought it was ripe for creativity and an injection of Gen AI, and they experimented. And now they're moving, I would say, from proof of concept into the production stage. And then I would just step back more broadly and say this. If we just talk about businesses, for example, every business has a line of business. It may be in the energy business. It may be in the financial services business. And then every business has a set of functions that support that line of business: sales, marketing, business development, HR, legal, finance. And I think what we're seeing is generative AI actually change the work process and the jobs in all of these different areas. Typically, if you're focused on investing and changing your line of business, you probably want to be fairly secretive about that. Yeah. You don't want to share that necessarily with your competitors. You might be creating your own IP, and it is that rapidly changing then the work and the work process for the people in that space. All of these other functions, though, that all of us share in common, I think it's much more ripe for companies to be sharing. You see actually new AI tools emerging, or AI applications or services. And I think in some ways, we might even see that changes in those different fields spread faster, just because you don't have to invent your own. You have other companies creating the tools, and people are more comfortable sharing. Mm-hmm. And that'll permeate, I think, across the workforce more broadly, more quickly.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that's a great backdrop get us going. Thank you. So, Leigh-Ann, can I turn to you? So, how are you using AI in BP already? Some of the benefits that you've seen, and tell us some of the risks to watch out for.
Okay. I think, as Brad has done, I'm going to step back just a moment because I think it's really important to start with the mission before we get to the tech. And we set out in BP or stall to become a net zero company. We said in 2020 we would do that by 2050 or sooner. And the energy transition, digital is absolutely critical as an ecosystem to enable the energy transition. So my job, I'm super fortunate, covers the physical tech at BP, so our scientists, our engineers, and the digital tech, and bringing that physical and digital world together to solve climate tech is absolutely mission critical for us. So when I think about AI, our first use cases in AI, which would have been about 5 or 6 years ago, was in the safety realm. So first of all, if I take an app that we use for fueling aircraft. So when you get on a plane, as many of you do quite frequently, you would want to make sure the right fuel goes on that aircraft. So one of our first AI machine learning apps was to make sure that the fuel and the aircraft matched. And we've done that now on 5 million successful flights. You'll be glad to know we continue, we'll have 5 million successful more. And so most of our AI evolved in safety, which is our core business. Automation in cyber. I think you guys are doing this in KPMG right now in audit. We looked at using AI to automate in cyber. And then if you take a more current application, so I'll go to Gen AI now, because I know everyone wants to get to Gen AI. I would say, however, Gen AI doesn't need to be used for everything. Some good old-fashioned machine learning is also appropriate. We have just taken all of our documentation in one of our engineering functions and put it into a large language model. And we set that model, the engineer's exam that we make our engineers sit every 2 years, and it passed. Not only passed, but passed with 80 to 90% success rate. So it's a silly example, but now that engineering function has all of that information in a nanosecond when they would spend 60% of their time not productive, you looking for information. We now have a Gen AI proprietary built model that does that for us. So we have hundreds of use cases. We're seeing immediate real life benefits in many of those today.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. Okay, thank you. And John, so no doubt at all that AI is transforming financial services. Can you share with us how HSBC is using AI to enhance operations and services and your approach to it?
Yeah, like Leigh-Ann, we've been using AI actually for over a decade at HSBC. Every single day, trillions of transactions flow through HSBC's universe of payments and other transactions. And all of those have to be screened for financial crime, for fraud, for many other things. There's no way you could do that effectively without artificial intelligence doing pattern recognition on the trillions of transactions that have flown every day historically, and then pattern matching what is a good transaction, what's a bad transaction, what's fraudulent, what's sanctioned, et cetera. So we've been doing that for a while. Equally, I know very few people use an ATM anymore, but around the world they still are used quite often, and we have thousands of them around the world, and we actually have to pay somebody to go refill those machines. And so we've had AI for a long time to actually know the best time to refill that. Now, if it's a brand new machine, obviously it would tell you that, but the older machines didn't. So you'd send them out twice a week, and half the time they'd still be full, half the time they emptied the day before. So using AI in that realm as well. Back to kind of more modern Gen AI and such, we really do believe, we have 52,000 developers at HSBC, 52,000 programmers developing code for our 10,000 applications around the world to support our customers. We strongly believe that we can use everything from the GitHub Copilot that Brad would be very familiar with, to many other tools that other partners are providing out there to make our developers 20 to 30% more efficient, we believe, in early returns. And we're already seeing some of that. Let me give you a sort of click down on that. A lot of the code that the core banking systems were written in 50 years ago, some of us weren't even born, some of us were toddlers, was written in either assembler language, for those of you who know what that is, PL1, or COBOL is probably one that at least some of us recognize. Well, those languages don't have folks around often anymore to maintain them. A lot of those programs haven't been compiled in a long time. And so you can use Gen AI to actually convert that code from those ancient languages into more modern languages, Java. Not that Java is the most modern language, but it's more modern than those, or other modern languages. And so you de-risk yourself from having that code that might not be supportable longer term. So it's another very practical use of what we're doing with some of the new Gen AI capabilities in coding.
Yeah, good, thank you. Some good use cases. And Brad, I assume you're drinking your own champagne in Microsoft. So tell us about Microsoft's own AI journey. So you touched on phases in your first response. So tell us about where you are going through those phases and that you're continuing to work through as you've evolved through this. What challenges did you face? And how is Microsoft yourself dealing with some of these?
Well, the great thing about working at a company like Microsoft is you drink the champagne well before it's ready. And that's how you help make it better for customers.
Yeah.
Or as we have long said in our industry, we don't talk about it as drinking our own champagne. It's always been eating your own dog food.
Right, okay.
So, but the interesting thing is, almost by definition, I think a tech company, especially one that is in the productivity space, it's the best of times and it's the worst of times. Yeah. You've got all the compute, you've got the best tools for the engineers to use. So much of the Gen AI space is so, I think, tailor-made for people who've spent their career mastering computer science and engineering, because if you look at prompt engineering, it just is almost a permutation or the next step in that. And then you've got other folks across the company, because we have all of these functions. And many of the folks that report to me are lawyers or government affairs professionals, got some engineers, communications folks, a sales force for nonprofits. And this is sort of where I have my personal passion in many ways. It's how to help people learn to use our co-pilots, because fundamentally, if you've been following us, what we're doing is creating co-pilots for everything. So we've got a security co-pilot that now for any security professional, they can use it, and it massively simplifies, automates a lot of things that a CISO has to go through. I sort of live in Word many times because a lot of what I do still involves writing, or live in email. And so using the co-pilots there, I just find this, it's like an adventure. Yeah. And it's an exciting adventure, because when it does something that I wouldn't have thought possible, I'm like, oh my gosh. And sometimes it doesn't do what I hope, because the technology is very early days. But I'll just give you an example. I'm still a licensed lawyer in Washington State. It means I need continuing legal education credits. So I applied for continuing legal education credits for the work and a participation about this time last year for the summit in Rome, on the Rome call for AI ethics. And I had to explain why that was relevant to lawyers. Well, Washington State has a facial recognition law. So I said, in Word, can you create a table that maps the principles in the Rome call to the provisions in this first AI law in Washington State? And I swear, I feel like it's watching magic. It's like, and I'm like, that is so good. That doesn't mean it wrote my memo, but it's a tool. And it's helping people experiment with those things and find where it can make a difference in, I would say, not just their ability to get something done faster, which it does, not just the ability to take away the drudgery, which it does, but to truly inspire people to be more creative. That, to me, is when it is at its best. And that, I think, is sort of the journey, the quest we're on, so to speak.
Yeah. And so the vision is you're going to create specialist versions of the Copilot. So you're getting to the point where you're inviting some of those to your meetings?
I'll give you another example. Let's always remember, this is a Copilot. I'd still like the pilot to come to the meeting. And I am so excited about what it can do. And then I feel it's part of my job, actually, to remind people about the role of the human beings. I did a town hall for our employees last week. One question that somebody submitted was this: my manager just gave me my review, and it was clear to me that AI filled out the review form in his feedback to me.
Yeah.
How should I feel about that? Is that a good thing for someone to do?
Yeah.
And I said, I'm a big believer in using this as a tool to maybe generate ideas, break through writer's block, but you want a human being to feel that they're hearing from a human being. Yeah. And so it's all about finding its place in the world and how it can help us, and when maybe we use it a little bit too much as well.
Yeah. So let's look at this from the perspective of our people and our teams, our pilots. So there's a mixed perception of AI in the workplace. So one of the recent studies that we did at KPMG showed that 64% of employees were optimistic about the benefits of AI. But in another study, you can see that 60% are wary about trusting the AI systems. So while there's optimism on the one hand, there's also some level of skepticism there. And so the way in which we manage the integration of AI into the workplace seems to be key to building trust in our employees. And Leigh-Ann, I was struck that you started with mission. So whilst there's all this disruption, have you been finding that laying out that mission has been helping in getting this journey? How have you helped prepare your employees for this AI-driven future, and what reactions are you getting?
Yeah, I think my biggest realization in the last 6 months is that the tech is evolving way faster than us as humans can adopt it. And so we are double-clicking now on culture and strategy, and the tech can kind of take care of itself because, as Brad has pointed out, I mean, my personal example, which is a bit odd, is I have Copilot in my 365 suite, and I use it to write my emails. But I was brought up in a time when handwritten notes were the thing. And so what I found was, if I don't like you, I let the Copilot write the email. But if I like you, then I feel like I have to write the email myself. And I used this example recently at a town hall, and people have told me now they're watching out whether they can detect whether I'm liking them or not.
I can tell you for sure, my wife won't reply to my Copilot-generated emails. That's for sure.
But it's that cultural revolution that I think is going to be really important for us to tackle with our team. So a couple of things that we've done. First of all, I think it's really important to get AI in the hands of everyone, democratize it. That's why we were one of a handful of people who went enterprise-wide from day one with Microsoft on rollout of Copilot, because it was the fastest way to get AI in the hands of everyone, and we're working our way through getting that to our teams right now. And letting them play with the technology, because you fear things that you don't understand. And I think once you start to realize how this can make you more productive, I think that really is job number one. But we're really going to have to be thoughtful about how to deploy it. Most of the tech that we have in our hands today, we probably only use 15% of, and that's going to be a huge waste of this technology. So working with our HR function, our strategy function, and our tech function coming together to say, how do we really truly enable this human-machine interface to be at its finest? And I think my favorite meme of the last year was, we thought that the computers would come and take our jobs and we could sit around and write poetry and read books. What we're finding is the computers are reading all the books and writing the poetry, and we're still doing all our jobs. So I'm keen to get to the poetry writing and book reading bit, and who doesn't want to be more productive, right?
Yeah, thank you. And John, so similar question, how are you managing this integration of Gen AI at HSBC with your people and your customers? How are you ensuring ethical issues are being addressed, and how's that really working in practice?
Yeah, it's a great question, David, and it's so important in financial services, especially as a UK regulated bank. we have customer duty. We have regulatory responsibility to all of our customers. And so we will not introduce anything to our customers that hasn't gone through incredible scrutiny and review and ensuring that there's no bias, there's no harm to customers. And the whole point of having what we call a human in the loop, I think, is really, really important for that. And that certainly a customer care agent can get prompted with information to communicate with a customer, but we still believe it's that human that communicates with the customer via chat or via voice or via email, not that it just goes out directly. Maybe someday it will, but not at this point. The other thing we've done is we've created an AI ethics committee. Banks love committees, by the way. It's a committee for everything. But this is a very important committee, and it's a cross-functional committee of folks from the different business units in HSBC, the different functions within HSBC. The risk function is predominant. The legal function is in there. And any Gen AI or any AI period use case that somebody's come up with that's tested, before we put it into full production, has to have the review of that committee and go through the challenge and check of, has it been risk modeled? Is it legal? How have we tested it? What's the impact to customers, et cetera? And so that committee so far has only approved a few of them, but sent many of them back to actually do more work before they go forward. The other thing that's really important, and while we haven't opened up for all employees yet, because there's a price tag that Brad benefits from on that, we are certainly opening up to certain communities that can use it. And then we're being very thoughtful about how we roll that out, but also giving some training to employees even before they have the tools so that they can be most productive when they start to actually use it. So we've got all kinds of online learning capabilities. Every single employee will go through an online course this year on AI, both the ethics of AI, and then here are some of the tools that are available today and some that are coming soon. So that's how we're approaching it.
Yeah. Yeah, KPMG, we're going to, on the 24th of January 2024, we're going to do 24 hours of training, just exactly as you've described it. It's a combination of how to use the technology well and how to be trusted in its use. And Brad, trust is earned in droplets and lost in buckets. So at Microsoft, what's your approach to some of these ethical considerations, and how are you helping also your customers tackle some of those issues?
I think the good news is we started early. Yeah. So it was 7 years ago now, in 2017, that, as you said, machine learning, AI was here, and we really created all of the infrastructure, and we built it off the infrastructure we had previously created for privacy and security and for digital safety. And so we have what we call our responsible AI infrastructure. We have a corporate-wide policy. It's on version 2. This year we'll likely move to version 3. It defines, in effect, the requirements then that are created for different products that they have to meet. We've created and are still creating sort of common tooling. So across the company, all the engineering teams can use the same tooling. We obviously have to have common training for everybody, testing. A lot of it is then testing. This is rapidly going to become more science every year. So we'll have the ability increasingly to measure against the various risks that we're concerned about. It's all about comparison of sort of performance versus certain risks. Ultimately, before products can be released, it's a bit similar to what you were describing in the world of financial services. It goes through a vetting process. There is an analysis by a centralized team. It makes a recommendation as to whether the product is ready for release. If they recommend that it's not, they identify where the gaps are. The team has to go back and address those. An engineering leader can seek to escalate something, but the reality is, once somebody says it's not ready, people go back and fix things. And it's been a huge volume of exploding work. So in so many ways, what we've really had to do is just put a lot more resources and more technology into this as a business process. And then I would just connect the dots as you did. One of the things that is so important in this space is that there are safety features, for example, safety standards that are important at, say, the model level, and then at the applications level. So we have our applications that have to then be tested with precision against these requirements, but customers create applications, customized applications. So we're doing a lot to try to just sort of transfer know-how to our customers so that they can then do the same thing. And a lot of this in regulated industries, and most industries are regulated in some way, have some regulator for something, is really a conversation that needs to go, we think, from us as a company that develops some of these things, to a customer, their industry, and the regulator of their industry. This has been true for cloud computing over the last 12 or 13 years. So this is the next iteration of that. And it's everybody really on a common journey at this point.
Yeah. So there's a number of themes here, isn't there? So there's good governance, as John talked about. There's a new business process here, which is quite voluminous. And then the third thing is you can use technology, and that technology itself is quite innovative to manage this risk and get insight into that risk. And that in itself can be a bit challenging to some of our risk professionals. So weaving all this together is a job of work. And so, Leigh-Ann, at BP, what does the governance over AI look like?
We, like John, love a committee. 114-year-old company, of course we do. But I actually think it's really important. This is a committee that's really important. So our Digital Risk Committee, we also embedded digital ethics into our code of conduct. We were one of the first companies to do that last year. I think that's really important. And we do work very closely with our general counsel. You can't ignore this. I think there are still some companies who are thinking about, do I want to take this step? Do I not want to take this step? And I would say, this is why we put AI in the hands of our employees, because this will be a revolution that they have to be part of. So I think not being in it is going to put every one of us behind. But I don't underestimate the risks. And therefore, your partnerships in your companies with your general counsels becomes absolutely critical. You've already seen in the press the onslaught of legal cases that are ongoing. This will be a theme. I think that's inevitable. So good governance from the get-go, good data structures from the get-go are going to be absolutely critical for those who are going to win in this space.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's a sort of way of going faster in a sense.
100%.
Take a breath and go faster. Okay, so John, here's one that gets asked quite often, and you talked about the human in the loop. So how do we ensure that we don't lose that human judgment, that experience, that insight, sometimes intuition, that is important in decision making as we're using AI increasingly for data analysis? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's by design, right? Like as you roll these technologies out, you design them to have that human in the loop. But you don't just roll it out and say, let's see what the computer can do. You actually roll it out and say, okay, the computer's going to generate information for a human to look at and then make a decision, as I described on customer service. But I think, as these technologies advance, that's going to be harder and harder to do. I think especially as each of the software suppliers that all of us use every day roll more and more capabilities in. And Brad, you talked well about how you think about that. Obviously, every other software supplier on the planet is thinking about it. That's going to get a little more challenging because there will be information rendered automatically by these software programs. Yes, still to a person, but that's the answer that they were hoping to get, and yet that answer hasn't been produced just by querying a data field. The answer's been produced by a Gen AI engine. So that's going to require even more governance, I think. Again, it's an overused word, but really understanding, and we're in the early days of this as we get new releases of software from our providers and we start to roll them out, understanding, well, wait a minute, what is this new release? What are these new capabilities? Are we actually comfortable rolling this out to our employees before we really understand what it does? And without naming names, there's one particular software company we got a release from. They had built some new Gen AI in. We were ready to roll it out, and then our cyber team looked at it and said, no, actually that's opened up a little cyber hole with what they're doing because they're tapping into a sort of a public Gen AI engine and pulling stuff down, but that's not quite a secure link. So we said, hey, hang on, we're not actually going to roll that out until we get that closed. So I think this is going to be a greater and greater challenge for all of us. It's funny, you said it well in the beginning, David, on kind of there's a lot of excitement about it, a lot of concern and risk. So I have a 13-year-old son who is really excited about AI and has found a summer course this summer to take. Believe it or not, they have this for middle schoolers in the US. I live in the UK. We live in the UK, but he's going to go back to the US this summer. He's going to take a course at Yale, and it's called AI, Apocalypse or Utopia. And so I can't wait to see what he learns from, he's going to teach me, his name is Gordon, he's going to teach me what he learns from this course at Yale on apocalypse or utopia, because it really can go, without thoughtful governance and care, it can quickly create some real challenges, especially in highly regulated, highly sensitive, data intensive, very fast transaction oriented environments.
Yeah. Let's unpack that a bit more, because if Gordon will enter the workforce, and the impact of AI and new tech generally on jobs is complex. Some jobs may disappear as you automate them away, and then new technologies will create jobs in industries we haven't even imagined yet. And so, the World Economic Forum itself, they did a study. By 2025, they estimate 85 million jobs globally may be lost due to automation, but then they find a greater number, 97 million new jobs may be created in new fields, data analysis, machine learning we touched on, software development we touched on, the green economy, the intersect between new technology and solving environmental problems. So, net, it looks good, but how does that transition work? It may not be smooth. There could be a period of displacement. There could be a skills learning challenge. There could be a social and an equality impact as we work through some of those things. So, same question to all of you. What are you anticipating will happen through this? What's your expectation on the impact of AI on equality and a fairer society? So, for this one, if we go Brad, then John, and then Leigh-Ann, please.
Well, I would put it in two contexts. First, in some ways, AI should dramatically lower the barriers to entry for many fields. You take cybersecurity, people in all probability are going to be able to dive into that field much faster because they're going to be able to rely on AI for assistance. And I think that's probably true of a great many professions and occupations. And I hope that in some respects, at its best, it may reverse what we've seen over the last 30 years, which is fundamentally the technology era has exacerbated the income divide based on levels of education. If this is something that people can use with less education, then it should lead to productivity advances, which I would hope would then lead to income growth for people in a way that they have not appreciated it. But then second, I would put it in a personal context, because ultimately it is a personal question for each of us, for your son, for all of our children or nieces or nephews or others, what's it going to mean? And everything that you described, I think, is almost certainly true. Some jobs will go away, new jobs will be created, and many, perhaps most jobs will change. And I think what it means at an individual level is people should really aspire to do two things. One is learn what kinds of new jobs are going to be in demand, or perhaps more what skills are going to be in demand. And think about really focusing on developing those skills, because if you have those skills, you are more likely to be successful. And the second is almost an attitudinal one. Yeah. So often, especially in the productivity space, technology can either make you smarter or make you lazier. And you have to decide. And just think about all of us. We live in a world where we don't have to check our spelling when we're writing something. And that's very different from when I first entered the workforce 35 years ago. So yet I think we're still pretty good spellers, because hopefully as the computer is correcting your spelling, you're paying attention. Or maybe not. Either way, you're not going to have misspelled words anymore. But just think about that as a slice of the future. When it goes back to your point, a computer can do the analysis for you. I wouldn't recommend just saying, oh, I'm done. Learn every day and assess yourself whether you think it's right, and use this as a new tool to make you better. And if you do, I think you're going to have a bright future.
Yeah.
I think that's spot on, Brad. What you just said, I have a direct experience in the last week about spelling and this and that. So, long story short, we were doing some documentation on travel for one of my other children, my daughter, and we were looking back, and we'd been on a few Caribbean cruises, and so I was typing in Caribbean, and I was spelling it C-A-R-R, and the thing would correct it. No, C-A-R, not two R's, then I-B-B-E-N, right? So I'd watched it a few times, then finally I started getting it right, because we had been on a few cruises. Then, literally a day or two later, one of the Christmas presents my son received it's a new type of Trivial Pursuit. I can't remember it's a funny name, but it's like Trivial Pursuit next level, 5 different categories or whatever. And one of the questions I got in there was spell Caribbean or Caribbean. And I'm like, thank God I just had it corrected, or I would have gotten it wrong. So it's case in point of what you're saying. Look, on the jobs and sort of future front, to your question, David, every single new technology, innovation, you could go back as far as you want in time, right? Back to the car and the horse, or the first computers, PCs, internet, robotic process automation, you name it. Any of those, and even other more engineering and mechanical, there's been these, predictions that, oh my God, it's the end of work as we know it. What are all these people going to do? Not going to be enough jobs. And sure enough, it's never happened, right? There are always new jobs that pop up, new industries that pop up, expansion in products and services that companies create. I mean, we could not deliver the kind of financial services globally that we do without all the technology that we have. But that doesn't mean, that we have nobody in the bank doing it. There's still, quite a few people that are needed and will always be needed to deliver the capabilities. The products get smarter. Wealth products now are a lot more complex, right, than they used to be because of that. So I don't see it as necessarily a job elimination. It's more of jobs will shift in different areas. I think you said that well, David. And Brad, you hit on a really good point on sort of the normalizing of society and the haves and have-nots. I do think that Gen AI especially will do more of that, because the internet started this big time with sort of you could Google anything, and then what you actually memorized was less important, more of what you could kind of figure out, and then what you do with it. But Gen AI is going to take that to the next level, because it won't even be about a fact. It'll be about sort of connecting dots and solving things. And then what do you do with that? And that will open it up for a lot more people globally who haven't had some of the basic education that might be historically needed for that. So I'm quite optimistic about what this will do. For now, 8 billion people in the world. We eclipsed the 8 billion mark earlier this year. So.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you. Leigh-Ann?
Yeah, I think that's so true, John. And I was a study, I think it was David Otter at MIT, about 65% of the jobs that exist in 2018 did not exist in 1940. So I don't worry about jobs being available in the future. That said, my daughter wants to be a lawyer, and in her gap year, I've got her doing data science boot camp at Imperial, so that when she becomes a lawyer, she'll be co-piloted and understand prompt engineering and all that good stuff. So I do think that's important. But if I look at my own field in energy transition, there is so much to do. So we have an AI model that will place optimal hydrogen plants in the world. We still need to get the levelized cost of hydrogen down to a level that can compete with traditional fuel sources. And we need to do that as fast as possible. There is no shortage of engineering time needed to do that. So the fastest we can free up our engineers to solve those difficult problems using co-pilots, the better it will be for the energy transition to move ahead orderly. So I think it's hugely optimistic. I think on the personal front, this doomsday scenario, before we get to doomsday, we need to worry about disinformation and discrimination.
Yeah.
And I think we have an upside to that. If you're neurodiverse, the ability to use a co-pilot Teams will transform your life. If you can't follow a meeting, you can watch the transcript, you can follow up later. I mean, this is already breaking down some barriers for minorities in our society already. And I think my personal commitment to that is to hire the diverse teams in the first place who build the tech so that you can actually build this kind of thinking into the models, because at the end of the day, people build the models, and if you hire the right diversity in the teams, we will build the tech that will serve society in the right way.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, there was some electrically brilliant answers to that question. I'm sure you love those. So first of all, there was some brilliant advice. I mean, we all have children, so I'm grateful because my children prefer to hear that advice from anyone other than me. So we've probably mixed it up a bit there. And then there's a great vision here that maybe AI could close some of these inequality gaps if we can get it into the hands of those who might have missed out on learning opportunities in the past or might have neurodiverse situations. So is there a responsibility on governments or on organisations to ensure that we're getting AI into the hands of those who might otherwise not? I don't know what anyone wants to take that one. Leigh-Ann?
Yes.
You were talking about getting people in through the door first.
I would just start by saying something that's obvious, but only if you think about it. You can't use AI unless you have a computational device. And you have to have connectivity, and you actually have to have electricity. So you need to have those three things. And then you always have to remember we still live in a world where 700 million people don't have electricity. So there's a lot of this that we do need government leadership in various parts of the world to fill in the gaps that exist. And then those of us in the market have opportunities to really think in a broad-minded way about our roles as well. I don't think we're the ones who are going to bring electricity. But we can certainly then focus on what we do bring and bringing it in a way that is likely to reach people more broadly. The other thing that I think we're just beginning to grapple with, and both of you have alluded to it, I think in a very helpful way, is it's one thing to bring the technology that people need, it's another to bring the skills that they need. And one of the things that I just find fascinating is if you look at employer investments in employee education and training, it rose quite markedly and steadily between 1980 and 2000. And I think those were the years when PCs entered the workplace, and there was a sense that you had to teach people how to use a computer and how to use a word processing program and how to use email. And then in the year 2000, it hit its peak. And it fell for a decade and then has been stagnant ever since. And I think that's because everybody reached the point of sort of figuring out or thinking that people would figure it out. They'd enter the workforce knowing how to use a computer, or they'd find their way to a YouTube video or something. And I don't think that that's going to be sufficient to help people really master all of the AI skills that people will want and need. And so I think we've entered a time when we need more investments in employee education and training. And I think large employers have the wherewithal to do that. A small enterprise doesn't necessarily have the same wherewithal. And I think there are things that we can do in the tech sector, certainly with a company like LinkedIn, which is part of Microsoft. There's a lot that we can do. I think there's things that governments can do. For example, tax credits for small businesses to invest in this kind of training, apprenticeships, labor unions. It's almost a society-wide call to action to equip the workforce with the skills needed.
Yeah, brilliant. So I'm afraid we're coming towards the end of our time. It's flown by, hasn't it? I mean, we could talk easily all day about AI. But as we close out, one last rapid-fire question to each of you, and it's this. What are the top 3 things that organizations need to get right to ensure they're building a human-centric approach to AI. So this time, if we go John first, Leigh-Ann, and then we'll finish with you, Brad.
So I would say human in the loop would be one. I would say appropriate governance would be two. And the third would be appropriate and helpful partnerships with the suppliers that are going to bring that capability to you.
Thank you. Leigh-Ann?
I start with strategy. What do you actually want the tech to do? What is your purpose is really critical. And then I would go to culture. This is without doubt more of a cultural revolution than a technical revolution. And then I will also pick governance, data governance, governance of the tech is really, really critical.
Yeah, brilliant.
I would endorse everything that both of you have said. I think you put it really well. I would say, as a supplier, go get the supply you need. People need to be able to use the technology in order to learn how to use it. But I do think then it's equipping people with the, in some ways, technical skills, the know-how, but it's also the ethical skills. A human in the loop is part of a broad approach to call it responsible AI or AI ethics, and that connects very closely with the governance. It is about culture at the end of the day, but those all are ingredients that contribute to it.
Brilliant. A huge thank you to each of you for your insight and reflections. Thank you. Okay, I can still